welcome to the Misophonia podcast. This is episode 21 of season 4. My name's Adil Ahmad, and I have Misophonia. This week I speak with Christina, a fashion photographer in New York/New Jersey. I'll let her explain it. And I'll have Christina's Instagram in the show notes. It's Deo_Christina, DEO_Christina. We start off by comparing our elevator pitches for how we explain misophonia to others, and we end on speculating on what misophonia is. Now, this was recorded before the latest research paper from Dr. Kumar's group, so take everything I say with a grain of salt, which you should do anyways. There are still about a half dozen or so amazing episodes for this season coming. It's been painful having to wait to publish these for you all, but they're going to be worth it. And I'm super excited to record a whole new batch of episodes starting in September, which means I'll be opening up the appointment calendar in a couple weeks. Now, lots of people have expressed interest in coming on the show, so they'll get first dibs, but stay tuned for an announcement on interview slots. Best way to be up to date is to follow on Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok at Misophonia Podcast, or Twitter at Misophonia Show. Now, if you're enjoying the show, the easiest way you can support is by leaving a rating or review wherever you're listening to the podcast. It really helps get this podcast in front of more sufferers. All right, now here's my conversation with Christina. Christina, welcome to the podcast. Good to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Do you want to first tell us kind of whereabouts you're located? We were just kind of talking about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I'm from New York, but I'm currently residing in Jersey City, and I just happened to pick the busiest, noisiest section in Jersey City. So that is where I'm currently residing, trying to manage all the noises every single day that this apartment has. So
yeah, I'm in the Midwest on one of the first, nice days of the year. So obviously there's like leaf blowers going everywhere. So, but I think I have them relatively at bay for hopefully the next hour.
Are leaf blowers like the main kind of like annoying noise? Because I guess people have yards over there. Where I'm at, there are not that many yards.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I think the homeowners are smart enough to not have them. It's the we live near a college, and so the like the managed apartment rentals, they for some reason they feel like they need to send like an army of leaf blowers every day to kind of do that. So, or at least the beginning of the season. So
yeah, it's so interesting when environments have their own kind of special set of sounds. Like when you're in a really urban environment like I am, you have the super loud music, you have construction. But then I hear if you go even in more rural areas, you still have like dogs barking from your neighbors, like all still like sounds of like there's always kind of, no matter where you live, there's always kind of like a set of noises that you become familiar with, I guess.
Oh yeah, I was just in literally yesterday I was at my in-laws deep in the country. So it's all like deep in the country, and so it's farmland. So so it's totally different. It's obviously not the city shit, but it's like there's some birds that have kind of some unusual, not the prettiest sounds, especially when they come in like in large flocks. So yeah, you kind of
Yeah, that's true. Actually, I went to Lebanon 2 years ago. My husband is Lebanese, so we went to his very small town in Lebanon, right south of the border. And I am from the Bronx. I have not heard roosters in real life, but oh my goodness, like 4 a.m. I don't know what time it was, but like the jarring sound of the roosters just going crazy. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. but I do assume though more in the countryside. I guess I always like fantasize that it's like a little bit more peaceful. You have nature.
Oh, it totally is.
Yeah.
No, it totally is. But it's I mean, I didn't mind the birds. Some other people were kind of bothered by it. Not miso level bothered by it. But,
yeah.
You know how it is. But they got those weird. It's also if you go into if you go into some of those smaller towns, you got all the all the guys that need motorcycles and large motors to overcompensate for themselves. So you have
for sure.
You get to pass by all that stuff on the roads.
Oh, I still have that here. It would be like 4 a.m. in the morning, 5 a.m. in the morning, and like I don't know what person with insomnia has issues, but they like go through my neighborhood sometimes. like revving their engines, and I'm like, come on,
Are,
guys,
well, aren't you
we are
turned on by
sleeping
that?
here.
I mean, aren't all women turned on by that?
Absolutely
I assume
not.
that.
That
Yeah.
is definitely not the case. I speak for all women. We do not. Okay. Well, you mentioned your in-laws. Do your in-laws know you have misophonia?
Oh yeah, yeah, yes,
Oh,
they
that's
do.
cool.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, so this is like what I wanted to ask you. Like I just been thinking. Do you have like not elevator pitch, but do you have like a digestible short description to tell people who haven't even heard of the word misophonia? Like what do you tell them
yeah.
if,
That's so funny.
yeah,
I
like
guess
I would love
I
to
don't have
hear
like
how you
I don't have a go-to, but I guess I would use I have some. I mean, the terms I would use in no particular order. They would just kind of come out as I organically would be like focus on the fact that it's a sound sensitivity. So it's like an oversensitivity. Um, and I can't, so things like, I would probably say it's like a super sensitive. I might mention it's a disorder. I'll definitely mention that lots of people have it. Uh, and,
Mhm.
and definitely mention that it's far more than just an annoyance. And there was another thing I would mention. Oh, that I have that people with misophonia just have problems processing certain sounds without
Mhm.
necessarily saying sensory processing disorder, because I feel like that needs to be maybe be diagnosed. But those are the kinds of things I would mention: extreme sound sensitivity, difficulty processing disorder, just to kind of throw in the fact that it's a little it's more of a well, we think more of a medical biological um,
Mhm.
issue. But I don't have to bring it up a lot because at this point, I tend to opt for the flight portion of the fight or flight slash
Interesting. So yours more flight
freeze.
than that's so interesting. So yours is like kind of more panic kind of thing, like the
Yeah,
flight aspect of
it's
it.
right. It's more the internalizing and then thinking, "Oh God, I is this going to end or do I need to leave?"
Yeah. Yeah.
As opposed to the lashing out, which the temptations are always there to lash out, especially I don't know if especially if you feel kind of trapped, like if you're sitting down at a meal, whether it's
Hmm.
at home or a restaurant. But even that, just because the onset comes on so hard, I think for me at least, I feel like I need to try even harder to shut down and try to look for a way out.
That's really interesting. Yeah, it's interesting to hear how
And
people react differently. Yeah.
right. And then the whole explanation part, and this has come up on a number of shows as well. It's just like,
Hmm.
at some point you're like, it becomes exhausting because you kind of know that you're probably, the probability that you're going to be dismissed or
Hmm.
or get that weird, like, deer in the headlights kind of stare is high enough that you're like, this isn't even worth bringing up. Why can't I just, what if I just get out of here? Just like
Right.
that's kind of the easier ways. I think all those factors are why I kind of tend to go for the flight. Sometimes it's usually not worth it in my mind, my
You know what?
calculation.
I feel very similarly when I tell people, like my kind of little pitch is, hey, I have a sensory disorder slash condition that it gives me a fight or flight response when I hear certain trigger sounds. Then usually the person's like, what are the trigger sounds? And then I say,
Right.
chewing, coughing, sneezing, clearing your throat, certain people's voices. Like, and then that's when it start like I stop myself from going too much. I usually just kind of say like mouth noises. And even though unfortunately as I get older, I have noticed the list has been getting added onto.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, sometimes it really depends. If I know I'm gonna be with people in enclosed position, enclosed space, and we're gonna be eating, I kind of like, all right, I think I should probably mention I have this in case I need to give them a heads up. Like, hey, we're gonna have dinner together in your house. Can we just play some music? Like, I need something in the background, and like I'll explain if needed. But for the most part, I've told some family members, and it's very much like the careful balance of I don't want them to act too comfortable around me because these are sounds that they can't really control.
Right.
But at the same time, it causes me so much distress instantaneously that I'm just always being stressed out. Sometimes though, like it's the careful balance of like how much discomfort you want to be and how much you want to make the other person kind of comfortable if they really don't get it, which most people won't to a degree. So it's weird.
Yeah,
Like,
no, no, exactly. Yeah, you don't want to. Then that's come up before too. Is like you don't want to. It almost no, because that's it adds stress on you if you see it. If you think about people have to walk on eggshells around you, and then that stress kind of just
mm,
exacerbates your kind of your misophonia. So
hmm.
yeah, yet another reason to really calculate if I need to mention it or not.
Yeah, I mean, the issue with me though is that my response is extreme anger. Like I get
Yep.
the fight just straight up just comes full force. Like I just want to wreak havoc if I cannot, if I'm getting triggered, I'm just so angry right away. And I
Do you say
actually was trying
something,
to,
or do you just kind of like clench your fist,
oh,
kind of thing?
so you know what? It's been strange because of COVID. Let me explain.
Yeah, no,
Before
it has been.
COVID,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
because I told you I'm in the New York City tri-state area essentially, and I would have to commute to Manhattan pretty frequently. And I'm gonna tell you, public transit is the worst because so you can imagine you're stuck in a moving vehicle of some
Hmm.
sort, train, bus, subway, and you're stuck with these sounds that you can't control. And people aren't wearing their masks back in the day, like it
Right.
public transit was such a huge issue for me to the point where I sometimes wouldn't even go on the subway if I see someone like chewing. Like I would just like it was so terrible, like you can't just tell someone, hey, can you stop breathing? Like if they're breathing heavily, that
Yeah.
sounds like a threat. Probably gonna get punched in New York if you'd be
Right.
saying that
Right.
to strangers. So before COVID, I was constantly being triggered, whether it be indoor dining or public transit, that feeling of trappedness. Um, but then now that COVID is a thing, unfortunately, I've actually been getting triggered a lot less. So I don't, because of that, because there's more space between my triggers, even though unfortunately I have been getting a lot more triggers, I'm able to kind of like hold back a little bit. The frequency or the lack of frequency has been helping me because before I was just constantly on edge and now I'm not so much to a degree. So it's like there's times where when I was younger, I did say something to someone like some guy was chewing gum at Barnes and Nobles, was trying to read something, and like I snapped at him and he looked at me like I was crazy because I was like 16 and I just like ran away like stuff like that. And
So you did
there
both.
have
You did the
yeah.
fight and the flight.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I did. Yeah, compound. There we go. And with certain family members, especially when I was younger, especially when I had such little control of my environment, I would say something, but I didn't have the word misophonia back then. They just thought it was like a quirk in my personality. So I would
Yeah.
say something, and unfortunately, a lot of times because they didn't understand, I would get dismissed. And like my first misophonia episode, I guess you could say, was just it was awful. Like I remember like it was yesterday. So it's just like, and I think you mentioned your podcast, you don't quite remember like the first time you've been triggered with misophonia, right?
I personally don't. Not exactly down to the right down to the day. Some people do, but most people don't. It's usually just kind of around that late you know junior high, late elementary school kind of time is when people notice something weird is happening.
Yeah, I feel like preteen, like, I mean, there's so much research that needs to be done. This is so relatively new, a new term compared to other, you know, disorders that's been studied for so long. But for me, I was 12 and I remember like it was just it was so bad. Like I was trapped in a car with my dad and my
Mm,
mom would kind of like give him lollipops because we would drive to visit my brother in college and it was like a 5 hour drive, 6 hour drive. And my dad would like to drive at night, so we'll get there early. And unfortunately, he would just like eat these lollipops. And as you can imagine, lollipops are terrible when you have misophonia. to say the
Yeah.
least. It's it's so awful. And as like I think I was 11 or 12, I would I was crying and I was begging him to stop. I was so angry and emotions were just overflowing. And I remember just kicking this his seat because I was behind him, just kicking his seat, just begging him to stop. And he thought it was hysterical. He's like, because he's
Oh,
kind of, yeah, he thought, because he's from an environment and generation that, you only cry if you have a good reason, that kind of thing. Or, you
if
know,
you're about to die or something. Yeah.
yeah, like, don't show weakness. Don't cry over something so
Right.
stupid. And unfortunately, I wish he had the emotional intelligence to see, hey, my daughter's super distressed. This isn't a normal reaction. Maybe I should stop doing whatever it's bothering
Yeah.
her. That certainly wasn't it. So hours upon hours, and this is in the first road trip we took to visit my brother. I was trapped in this car, just really stuck and feeling trapped, feeling so angry to the point where I wish I would just like I fantasize like opening the
Jump.
car door
Yeah.
and just jumping out. I was
That's
like
exactly
anything
what I
to
was
make
gonna
it
say.
stop. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I remember, and I spoke to my mom about this and she really apologized for not knowing like how bad it was, and I've explained to her what misophonia is, and I'm not the only person who has this. But yeah, but basically like I think back about that sometimes and like I remember like I even feel emotional just thinking about it right now. It's crazy. It
Oh
happened
yeah.
so long ago. Yeah.
Yeah, it had a huge impact. Was there ever a period before it was bothering you where you were doing those road trips and it wasn't bothering you and then suddenly it came on, or was it from the first road trip to your brother?
I don't think we took any long trips like that.
Mhm.
I can't remember if there was, and if there was, it wasn't to that degree. That was just like the first memory I had
Yeah.
where it was so bad that my whole body was reacting to the sound that even I knew back then shouldn't be causing me to get so upset and so incredibly angry. And yeah, so I don't remember before that, but
Yeah. Did you start to spread then to, eating at home and all the other usual places?
well, what's interesting is that I didn't know the word misophonia until I was like 24. So, like I said, like my family just thought this was like a quirk in my personality.
Yeah,
Christina's a
right.
little different. I am, but basically I don't remember avoiding I don't remember it because I didn't have a label. I can't quite pinpoint when exactly I've been triggered, besides certain very, obvious cases like the Barnes and Nobles or, the
Yeah.
car, like driving the car. I just remember like begging my mom, hey, if we're gonna take a trip with my dad, can we just not give him any lollipops? Do not give him anything to eat because it's gonna I can't, mom, I can't do it. She's like,
Yeah.
okay, I'll
Yeah.
try. And I think for the most part she like did, but like it's very different time back then anyway. So I don't quite it wasn't until like I just remember bits and pieces throughout my childhood and adolescence that I had these kind of outbursts or intense feelings of rage over a sound, but it wasn't until like my early 20s that I felt that it was very problematic. Like it was distressing, like almost every day kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's not coming to me. I know I was bothered by it back then too, but it wasn't like it was.
Hmm.
First of all, I didn't really notice it. I don't really remember it bothering me at school. Thank God that I was able
Yeah,
to get
right?
out with some
Same,
good
a little
grades.
bit. Yeah.
And so, but yeah, once that independence starts to happen around college, post college, is when yeah,
Hmm.
things it just starts to blossom. And so that's when it gets kind of crazy. Did okay, so yeah, so it sounds like similar for you, right? Like it didn't do anything too crazy. Well, do you remember anything with friends where you're like, yeah, I can't hang out with that friend anymore, or back
No,
in
because I
high school,
wouldn't.
whatever.
No,
Hmm.
I wouldn't really. Well, what's good about my high school is that you weren't allowed to chew gum, so I never really had issues in like quiet settings. For me, it's a quiet setting. If there's no noise, then that's when it's the worst, when I'm
Oh
hearing this
yeah,
trigger sound. But like for the most part, I mean, I'm from a very noisy family in a noisy environment, for better for worse. And for the most part, there's always been like background noise.
yeah,
But
white noise in the background.
yeah. Did you ever have like a 9 to 5 kind of job where you're like in the office?
Oh
Like
yeah, yeah.
I'm yeah, so how did you deal with that? Because for me, that's when I was like, ooh, this could be a real issue. I'm having a hard time here. And I feel
No,
like that's
that's
the case
good
for a
because
lot
I
of
do want
people.
to. Yeah, I do want to talk about your line of work too. But yeah, but yeah, no, I have had. So currently, so I'm a software, basically, engineer. So right
Cool.
now, I just work. I'm here in my home office, up on the third floor attic of my house. So,
Nice.
but there have been times where I've been every kind of office, open office, startup, or like a office with doors and walls, offices with cubicles. And yeah, I mean, honestly, the most recent job I've had, like they in tech, their companies are generally pretty good about a letting you wear headphones, but b
Mm,
sometimes even
yeah.
giving you headphones because it's not even just the misos that want that kind of quiet, be able to concentrate. So my company just gave everybody like nice headphones, and
Nice.
so but if you're just kind of like naked out there in an open office, it's kind of rough. I don't like eating, like having lunch with the team. Like I like going to lunch down the street, grabbing something, and then I'll just go back to my desk and not,
Hmm.
I don't want to sit around watching people eat,
Hmm.
especially like
Hmm.
every single day. So, and I always thought that I was just being, I always thought maybe back when I was younger, I was just bored by the older guys, but I think I just didn't want I just didn't
Yeah.
want to, literally just sit around watching people eat. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, I've been in every kind of situation, but it's, you gravitate towards the headphones and you gravitate towards the home office. And eventually, that takes care of itself, unless there's leaf blowers outside.
So my newest, yeah, leaf blowers. My newest, one thing I did learn about COVID, a lot of like classes or lectures, especially if they were recorded before COVID, they were all over YouTube and these other websites if you're like trying to
Mm-hmm.
learn a new skill. And what got me that I had to stop watching those classes, that if someone were to cough or sneeze off
Yeah.
camera,
Yeah.
I immediately had to turn off. I had to turn it off because it caught me so off guard. So it's interesting because even in the virtual space with Zoom and video calls, my husband's working at home. And if someone's coughing or sneezing, like it's even then I never not hear it. And I may not have the super instant reaction of anger, but it always like shakes me up. And it's just
I totally
can't
agree.
escape it.
I
Yeah.
totally agree. I watch YouTube, yeah, all the time because I'm kind of like, yeah, ADD in terms of like what I want to learn, and so
Hmm.
um,
Same.
it's just, but sometimes it's not even. Sometimes it's even the video, the teacher, if they put like compression on their vocals in in the wrong way, and then you hear everything like at the same volume, kind of like on the
Mm.
radio, kind of like a radio voice. If you do compression the wrong way, then you hear kind of everything as loud as your loudest speech. And so sometimes I'll just hear throat sounds as loud
Oh my
as the
goodness.
talking, and
Yeah.
it's just like I have to shut it off. I've definitely had to do that. And that goes back. I remember that. I remember one particular video I saw back in like, I think it was like 2008 or 9 or something. And that's one of the few like real memories I have at some point. Watching video on some programming language or whatever, and the guy just like I just heard everything, not just his speaking, and I was like, holy shit! I think that's when maybe I start to like Google around for like,
What's wrong
are
with
other
me?
people? Yeah, because I was on the computer anyway, so I was like, yeah, what's
Mhm.
came across misophonia. So how did? Oh yeah, when did you, I guess, realize that? How did you get to the point where you realized it had a name? Were you actually Googling for it, or did
Not at
somebody
all,
send you a
because
link?
I grew up thinking that I just had this thing and I felt so alone, especially as I got older and it getting worse. I was a receptionist at the art school I graduated from the first year after my graduation. So anyway, receptionist at this office, and one of my coworkers, we were just talking about like weird annoyances. And of course I mentioned, oh, when people eat popcorn or they chew, I just want to punch them in their face. Like I said it like, yeah, I have this weird thing about me where I just can't stand the sound of people chewing. And she looks at me and she goes, my boyfriend has that. You have misophonia. And I'm like, miso what? Like, what is this? What is that? And she's like, you should just Google it. Go for it. I'm sure you're
Yeah.
gonna see. And oh my goodness, I remember that night. It was so illuminating, but also kind of depressing. Illuminating and nice in a way that you have a community of people who know how it is to be triggered and have like feel so upset, angry, or anxious over certain sounds that are otherwise normal to other people. To find
Common
people
people.
that are,
Yeah.
yeah, they're like dealing with this. It was nice to have that community. But then at the same time, as I went down that hole on Reddit, and it was just, oh, sorry, I just cleared my throat. When I went down the hole on Reddit, and it was just very depressing because there is this kind of there's this kind of common thread that there's no cure and it gets worse as you get older.
Hmm.
And you just have to kind of live your life the best you can with this. And, I was hoping there was some kind of tools or something I could take to help me, but, at least we're not alone. But it is a very mysterious condition that luckily now a lot of research is being done. But I want to say back in 2014, barely, I was just happy we had this label, but that was about it. So that's how I discovered the word misophonia.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. That kind of word of mouth there. Yeah, you're right. Online, and that's why it's one of the reasons why I started this podcast is because online, you can definitely you just kind of hear people when generally people go online to post something on misophonia. It's they're in a mega
A
triggered
height.
state, so you see
Mm-hmm,
the word kind of the most rantiest kind of darkest kind of stuff, which we all know about, but
mm-hmm,
yeah, it's and yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that there are any radical new tools or cures or anything, but at least you're not really missing. You haven't really missed out on anything. Usually, what you've kind of learned to do uh, is, you know, you just have to kind of continue, and maybe you learn some, maybe you find some solace at least
mm-hmm,
in knowing that uh, and well, one thing is like you get more freedom over time. Like you're not in your
mm-hmm,
giant loud family anymore as you get older. So what I try to tell people is like, yeah, I mean triggers get worse and there's no cure, but at least you can kind of control your environment a bit more. It's like
mm-hmm,
like I'm an adult. I can control the thermostat in my house. I don't have to freeze all the time because my parents are too cheap. It's the same with sounds. It's like I can kind of control my environment a little bit more, and so that's the one thing we have. While there's hopefully more research happening, and there is.
mm-hmm. It's so interesting you say the word control because that is a word that has just
Yeah,
been in my mind lately. And it's funny for me how I personally have been trying to get better, not better, just try to adjust to what I have, is accepting the lack of control that I have. And yeah, no, for sure, living on your own or like just now with your parents helps tremendously. But unfortunately, I do live in the most noisiest apartment I've ever lived in my life. And there's so many, I don't get misophonia triggers, but I certainly do find just sounds it's weird. Maybe you have something similar where your brain can filter out noises that other people don't really hear. Like it just felt like they filter out certain noises. I can't. So any kind of ambulance, any kind of someone's coughing across the street, my neighbors sneeze, I could hear that. It's crazy.
through the
But
walls.
through the walls.
Yeah.
So it's like, and one thing that has helped me was just kind of just meditating on the fact that this is what I have and I can't control it to a degree. I really can't. And just accepting that and just remembering that even if I do have a huge misophonia trigger an episode, there's so many more moments of my day that I don't. So that's the only way that kind of one of the ways that kind of gets me through it because as you know, it gets sometimes it gets really stressful, especially as things start opening up in this country and stuff. Like indoor dining is going to be a thing more and more, and life will slowly get back to how it was before.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, most of our days are not me, so it always hits us every day. There's always something,
Yeah.
but it's funny, yeah, because you would none of us will want to think about it, but sometimes thinking about it in advance when there's no triggers is a way to kind of massage your mind into um, not being so afraid of what
Hmm.
you're gonna hear. Because that neighbor sneezing across the wall, our brains think that something is going to come and attack us through the wall or something. It's just like
Hmm.
we can't process uh, dangerous things from these kinds of sounds, like real danger from this illusion of danger. Is I
For
think
sure.
something to what's happening. Um,
It's a
do
great
you want to
point.
maybe do you want to talk about a bit about what you do for work? You were a receptionist, but now you're I think a little bit more independent, right? I mean, in terms of like
Oh
you're not
yeah.
in terms of office
Yeah.
space.
So receptionist was many moons ago in my early
Yeah,
20s.
yeah.
Um,
Right.
but yeah, so I am right now I am a freelancer. I'm a photographer. I specialize in fashion, beauty, and portraiture. Mostly
And we're
fashion
gonna have your
photography.
Instagram because you do amazing work. Amazing work.
Thank
So
you. Thank you. I
I'm a
appreciate
bit of
that.
a wannabe photographer too, so I admire really good work. So yeah,
Oh, thank you. I
continue.
appreciate that.
Continue.
Yeah. And photography was always with me, but when I graduated art school, I looked down the real world and I was like, ooh, that seems really harsh. I got student loans. Let me forget about photography and just get like a 9 to 5 job so I could,
Mm.
not be scared of being impoverished. So I quit photography for half a decade. I did not touch my
Oh.
camera. Camera was collecting dust. And I was just denying this part of myself. And I worked at a corporate office. I worked at Bloomingdale's, which is owned by Macy's. And that period of time was when I was like, ooh, this is a problem I have. This is definitely a condition that is always kind of lurking in the shadows. Because when you're
Mm-hmm.
in an office space, and we were in a dark room because I was a photo retoucher, and you need to have like a controlled light situation to match colors of products, all this
Yeah.
jazz. So I didn't. So you have that extra thing of like not really seeing what's around you, but then hearing these sounds. One of the worst triggers to this day was when my boss, we were cool at the time, all's good. He kind of, so I was typing on my computer. I didn't see him come from behind, and he was eating a banana, and he just schlocked
Oh.
like I don't,
Yeah.
the slushy
Yeah. Yeah.
chomping of the
Hmm.
banana. He was right next to my ear because he was kind of like, "Ooh, what you doing on the computer?" And I was working, but like he was just kind of being, I guess, funny. But he said that while he was eating, it caught me so off guard that I just kind of said something. Like I was just like, "Yeah, I'm just working." He walked away, and literally, I was about to throw up. I
Yeah.
never had such a trigger that was so like I had such a physical reaction of just I'm gonna vomit at my desk. All right, this is gonna be something. Like luckily I was able to just breathe and try my best to calm down. It took like 40 minutes. I didn't even want to get up from my seat to go to the bathroom because I didn't want anyone to like look at my face and be like, "What's wrong with you?" I'd be like, "So many things." But
Hmm.
basically, yeah, like that was my worst triggers were in like a workplace environment. And I don't miss it. So when I
Yeah.
finally made the leap of like, all right, actually a photographer and I'm good at photography. Why aren't I doing this? Um, Eventually I made the jump of being a freelancer and it's been a lot better. Commute a lot less into the city, into Manhattan, and I make my own hours, all that jazz. Photo shoots, I have to be a little bit careful. I do editorials, so well before COVID, it was like larger scale, and we have food, so I always have music
Right.
on. So it's been okay. It was okay as long as I had music. So yeah, so that's kind of yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Yeah, it's great that you've definitely gravitated towards having a bit more. Did you get to kind of like call the shots on the set? Because you obviously you probably can't wear headphones or whatever because you're communicating with
Absolutely.
people.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and then
So
the food
basically,
as well.
you're like head honcho. Like you are the captain of the ship, and you have to. A lot of pressure when you're doing a fashion editorial because you have a time constraint and you do need to feed people because if you're on set for like 5 hours, I like to feed people because I've had models tell me, yeah, some photographers just don't bring any food and I'm starving. And that really affects the mood
Mm,
of the shoot. So
yeah.
I always have music, and that's why music is so important to me because I get kind of obsessed with it. Like I have playlists where I very like I specifically organize it in such a way it just like get the feel of the shoot. And so I'll just have a lot of fun with making music and just cranking it up to a volume that's not super loud, but enough that people are eating on the side. Like I'm not really going to stress out about it because I have that other
Right.
noise
Loud,
factor.
loud, loud enough it doesn't bother you. People know who's in charge, but it doesn't hurt their ears. These
Exactly.
their little common people ears. Yeah, very good. Do you have like do you? So I've talked to some people who I'm actually gonna probably share some one or two playlists of people who they've created a Spotify playlist where it's all music that kind of gets going right away. That there's just no like um, you know. Uh, crescendoing into a song so that it's like everything can kind of be kind of a go-to song. Do you ever think about the miso while you're kind of setting organizing playlists, or is it more just kind of mood for a photo shoot or wherever you're at?
I have so many playlists, so I will have shoots just for like the mood of the photo shoot.
Yeah, yeah,
I'll have playlists where um I'll just have certain categories. Like I have one called Vibes, very young
yeah,
person name, but just like very kind of soothing, just kind of lower key music, and have music where it's like it's rock.
yeah.
I don't quite think about misophonia. I just kind of intuitively pick music that I know will generate a certain mood. And I really concentrate on music because it just affects my mood so much. Like, and usually for better, especially if I'm having like a misophonia outbreak, I have to calm down a bit before I can listen to music. I know some people would just like try to ignore their whatever's going on with them with music. I can't quite do that, but certainly music could have such a calming effect on me. So I kind of use that to my advantage when
So
I
you need to
can.
use it to kind of like reset a bit or
Sometimes,
get
yeah,
back to equilibrium.
yeah,
So
sometimes.
you're in a creative you're in a creative field, and I'm wondering, have you met other people in any of your creative fields that also have misophonia? It seems like there are a decent amount of creative slash even engineering types that have misophonia. I'm curious if you bumped into others.
I only have one friend acquaintance, and she's in the culinary field, so no one that's like an art like a photographer or other artists.
Yeah,
And that's why it's so interesting with this podcast. I'm so happy you do it because sometimes I forget that there are people who deal with this because I don't really know anyone else. And I used to like send her emails like, hey, I had this one like I like ran to her and I'm like, why am I doing this? Like this is not fair to her, um because but we connected so much with having this condition, so we would talk about it, and it was so nice to for each of us to have someone who understands this. And I knew her for a long time, and it wasn't until someone recently that I knew that she was struggling with this. I just posted something on
mm,
Facebook a long time ago. She's like, oh, I have this too, because I kind of I don't know, it's definitely misophonia related, just kind of like throwing it out there. um and she was like, oh, I have this. Then we got into this huge conversation, and for
yeah.
her, not to give too much of her story, but like she kind of had it has it a lot worse, to the point where she definitely had to move. Even her
Mm.
partner at the time was extremely inconsiderate to what she was going through, and it really affected her life. And I think she's doing better because I think she moved to a quieter place, and she has a new significant other as well. So but it really goes to show you that when you have misophonia, like it could really affect your life, your relationships, where you live. Like and she understood that. So it was really nice. But other than her, I don't know anyone else. And that's what I'm hoping
Mm.
with your podcast and just more information kind of comes about. Awareness is, I'm sure there's so many people who have this and they just don't have a name for it.
So how about your significant other? So you've been obviously at home like we've all been, and he's got his meetings, you got your stuff going on, and we talked about you know pandemic gets us away from a lot of our regular triggers like the
Mm-hmm.
subway, but then I think after, but I'm sure by the end of last year, everybody, miso or not, common people and not, were kind of getting tired of kind of maybe feeling a bit claustrophobic and kind of cabin fever. Was that kind of starting to affect maybe your miso at home at all, or did
You
that
know,
change at all during the kind of pandemic?
it's interesting because I lived in a much smaller apartment. The funny thing about me, I move every single summer. So the
Mm,
apartment that I was last summer was significantly smaller, and there was kind of like this claustrophobic. I can't go anywhere without hearing a
yeah.
meeting or hearing, that was, I just had to adjust. It wasn't great. There was also height of like pandemic stuff, so there's a lot of emotions going on with that because I live.
Elections or
Oh my
insurrections,
goodness.
yeah, all
Yes.
kinds of stuff.
Exactly. And now it's a lot better because we have a little more space. And I'm so thankful and grateful that my significant other is understanding, to a degree. Sometimes actually, it's interesting because he doesn't really trigger me only when he sneezes. So
Mm.
when he sneezes, I just kind of like have a moment, but like I calm down. But other than
Do they
that,
come in a
luckily,
series, or is it usually just one
no, not
sneeze
a
and then
series, thank
okay,
goodness. Oh
okay.
my gosh, imagine like if we had a series of sneezes, because I have met people who just like cannot
The
stop sneezing once
allergies, and
they.
it's around that time, right? Yeah,
Yeah. So luckily, for him, like I explained to him misophonia is, and he tried to understand. He's like, it's only, see, this is the thing. I think there's only so much someone could empathize, because I think for other people, it just sounds so ridiculous. Like I always
yeah.
kind of think of how the other person is perceiving it. Oh, you can't hear people chew. What do you expect people to not chew around you? You know what I mean? Like there's this element of like, why do you get triggered over these normal sounds? And I can't answer that. He never asked me that, but I always kind of think of like how we sound on the other side. And
Yeah, that goes back to our original conversation about
yeah,
do we even bother?
exactly.
Yeah,
But for him, I live with him, so I'm like, you know what? Let me tell him. And it wasn't until like someone, I mean, I told him about misophonia, I think probably a year after we were together. And we weren't, well, actually, yeah, we were living together then. But it wasn't until recently that I have kind of told some family members or a couple of friends. I've been very private about it for the reasons that we've spoken about before. But he's been understanding, and I'm really thankful for that.
what's been the reaction of your friends? I guess maybe especially your family.
Mm. So my mom, she was so apologetic because she
Right. Yeah.
remembers all the outbursts I would have. And she's very conscious of it, to the point where I feel kind of bad because we went to visit my brother in Michigan, and we were at his house and we were eating. So I had to have the conversation to everyone being like, hey, we need to have music. Like, we need to have some music. We're
Yeah.
going to eat. And she was like, yeah, totally. And it was interesting. Actually, my sister in law, my brother's wife, knew what misophonia was. She was the
Oh,
only person besides my other friend. Yeah. So really, that was so awesome. But when I first told my brother, he was, it was a little hard because I think he's very cautious with anyone self-diagnoses themselves. He's very educated. He has a PhD. He trusts science a lot, and he's very wary of like the internet, I think, and stuff like that. So I get it. But when he's like, "Oh, you have misophonia," and then he would like do a fake chewing sound, and
uh-huh.
I was just like, "You, you react exactly how I thought Dad would," and that was like my little zinger. and
Oh,
basically, but I have to say though, like he actually, it's so interesting with him because he was so respectful. Whenever we ate, he always had music. He like even having like even though initially he seemed like he was like dismissing it, he was actually very respectful. So I really can't complain in that sense. But for the most part, I haven't really told that many people. That's why it was kind of hard for me to even like be on your podcast, because it's kind of like a lot of people don't know I deal with this. A lot of close friends have no
everyone's gonna
idea.
know soon,
Everyone's
Christina. The
gonna
whole
know.
world's gonna know.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
seriously,
buy
I'm just like,
ads on Facebook targeted at all your
no.
friends.
That's so funny. Oh my God, that's so funny. No, But basically, it's like, it's because it's you always run through you always like run into the risk of like someone not only dismissing you but like taunting you as if like there's no way you have this,
I
and then
hope
they
at our
try to do your
age,
triggers.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. I hope at
Have you
our
ever
age
dealt with
that
that?
tends to go. No. Well, not that I remember. I hope maybe that I've blocked those people out of my mind, or I've um threw them over the bridge or something. I don't know, but I don't really remember that anybody doing that. I definitely hear about a lot of that happening, but
Mm-hmm.
more so when it's siblings growing up, kind of thing. I've heard stuff like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, that hasn't really been a problem with me.
That's good. I'm so happy to hear. Like I know I'm never gonna tell my dad. Like I just don't think he has the capacity to
Okay, so he's not.
understand.
He's in the
Yeah.
dark. Yeah.
He's
Okay.
in the
Okay.
dark, and to be honest, I rather him because like I don't see him that often anymore, so I can handle it. It's one thing if I was like living across the street from him, but
Do you
yeah.
did that? Do you feel like it affect? I mean, obviously it affected those road trips. Did it? Do you feel like that affected or caused any kind of distance between you and him or any of your family members that would not have been there had you not had this
Now
fun?
you
Yeah.
mean like how no, because I'm actually going through therapy right now. So
Oh.
one thing I've kind of already accepted, you know, my parents, my dad for who he is, and I don't really hold any anger or distance from
Hmm.
him. I do distance myself a bit, just knowing that the more interactions I have with him, sometimes I it's more opportunity for him to kind of get under my skin. But for the most part, they didn't know what it was, and we still don't know what misophonia really is. And it's just I can't change the past, so I just try to accept them because if I don't want like the resentment or
Yeah.
the anger to take hold.
Right. Right. Did you start to seek therapy primarily because of this, or were there other reasons? And we don't have to get into them. I'm just curious that
Sure.
how much
Yeah,
of misophonia affected that relationship, and then the decision to go see therapy and whatnot.
sure. And after I answer this, I'm really curious to hear like if you have heard any luck with therapy, if you yourself
Hmm.
have done therapy. But for me, I basically was diagnosed with OCD, which is just a label. Like there's still basically I was just having certain compulsions and certain obsessive thoughts that were really affecting my life, affecting my relationship, specifically when it came to cleaning and organization. I thought I was just going to do therapy for like 3 months. Now I'm almost like
Hmm.
approaching a year because one thing, and I used to be really against therapy for whatever reason. It could have been the environment I grew up in. I had very strong family members who dealt with so much more than I feel like I've dealt with, and they seem okay. Um, and that's a fallacy too. But basically, I sought out therapy because I wanted to get better, and my life was getting really rough when it came to like I would freak out if I touched a broom. Like I wasn't able to wash dishes. I would just cry hysterically and I just want to break every dish that was in the sink. And I'm like, this isn't normal. Like I shouldn't be.
Mm.
These are really extreme emotions. And I figured, you know what? Let me get some help here because I don't think I could do this on my own. And then COVID happened. I literally had my appointment on Sunday, the Sunday before the Monday of my appointment,
Lockdown. Yeah.
lockdown. So that was fun. So I was there left with my thoughts. Terrible, terrible time. But then as I went through therapy, of course I mentioned about misophonia. And but that wasn't the main thing. My main thing was this thing I had with cleaning and these thoughts.
Mm. Hmm.
But when I mentioned misophonia, I was very careful because one thing about Reddit, better for worse, there are many times I've came across where therapists are very dismissive because they haven't heard of it. And also
Hmm.
I'm seeing a psychologist, just to clarify, like, oh, because they haven't heard of it, there's a lot of, skepticism. Even my
Yeah.
brother, who's extremely educated, has probably a similar skepticism. But I'm very lucky that the person I'm seeing seemed very open minded to it. And he asked me really great questions. He's like, tell me how it's like. And I explained to him. And at one point, I think he may have suggested, like, hey, maybe there's a way before you get really angry or you're feeling something, we could kind of just pay attention to that feeling and like try to help it. But what I was trying to explain to him is that it's instantaneous. Like just as if a glass were to break in front of you,
Yes.
you would have that jarring experience. When I hear certain sounds, that is what happens. And my instant reaction, unfortunately, is extreme anger. And I'm just trying to explain my experience, and I'm very lucky that he's been receptive to it, it seems. But there's not really much that you could talk out of to a degree when you have this because, like, I don't know. I don't, and maybe if I go to someone who's like specialized in misophonia, but that's also really rare, or at least around my area. But yeah, that's how my experience so far has been good in terms of the quality of care I've been receiving. But hasn't really helped with the misophonia. That's still a
Yeah, it seems like
problem.
it's more there was an acknowledgement, and then they're probably he's probably offering some kind of general baseline therapy advice.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, this is not uncommon. I think most people I talk to have gone into therapy who have misophonia go into it with some other comorbidities like OCD or
Mm,
other anxiety or something else, and misophonia may or may not be the even known by the therapist. In some cases,
hmm.
yeah. Um,
Mm.
I couldn't. It's kind of honestly, it's kind of. Talked to so many people. I might as well. I should probably write it down or something. But I feel like it's all over the board in terms of
Yeah,
like
yeah.
efficacy and
Mm,
a lot of people are just maybe have like you said it's new, so they've just started the therapy. So it's kind of like the jury's still out as
hmm.
to how well this is all going to work. So we're heading. I mean, we're heading. We could keep going on and on and on. But
I know, but it's probably time, right?
I do, yeah, because I have a day job too. So, but
Yeah.
I should, but yeah, we're up to an hour. But is there anything else you want to kind of share with anyone right now? Insights or anything? I don't know. Maybe you want to ask me before we wrap it up.
Hmm.
If you don't,
So
that's cool. I always open phones for you.
you're not a medical professional. We know this. However, since you have interviewed so many people at this point with your podcast, what do you have any just like kind of fun theory regarding what you think misophonia is most likely, like what it is? And I know again, not a medical professional, but I'm just really curious anecdotally. Did you yourself
Well,
have
I'm
it and
definitely
you
smart
spoke
enough
to
that everyone
somebody?
should take me seriously. So I'll put that
Cool.
out there
Yes.
first.
I'm going to
Uh,
take notes. Go ahead. Go ahead. What do you think?
so wait, my gut. I mean, my gut feeling is that. So there's a couple different things. There's like, the debate of whether this is kind of like genetic or learned. I feel like
Mm,
my spidey sense just tells me it's there could be something that you're born with, but it doesn't necessarily get activated unless there is something in your environment
hmm.
that um, that might be associated with, and I'm going to use the word trauma, but something that it could be like very obvious trauma, or it could just be something that bothered you, and then the sound kind of always associated with that thing or that person that kind of activates misophonia. I feel like there's a combination of something that you're kind of, something that's in your brain that you might be born with, and that or gets activated by some association with something that happens to you around the age of, and I think you're most susceptible around the age of of puberty,
Hmm.
and then that what that thing is, I think, is what that activates. It feels like it just activates something from our lizard brain that is meant to warn us to danger, and I feel like
Mm-hmm.
we get that this could because this is what it feels like it is. It's like we're hypersensitive to something that feels like it feels dangerous to us. So I think somewhere in that's kind of what it feels like to me, and as to whether what we should do about it beyond wearing headphones, I'm not sure. But and talking to people about it and trying to convince our. This is why I try to tell people to if we can lower stress, because stress is an exacerbator,
Hmm.
and
Definitely.
remind our minds, but maybe before we sit down at a restaurant or at a meal, that okay, look around. There's nothing here that's going to attack you. The sounds are not going to hurt you. If you can do that in advance, and we never remember to because we try to not think about it unless that glass breaking sensation happens. If we can try to do that, that's kind of maybe our best hope for now. But so those are kind of my thoughts as to where it might come from and why certain things kind of help us and how we can kind of best manage it. Does that make sense?
That totally makes sense. I agree. And I do personally think that there is a genetic component to it. My grandmother, I suspect that she has misophonia, actually. She's always made such a big deal about people chewing with their mouths open. Didn't connect it until I read up on this, So I agree with everything you're saying, but I also do think, like a little sprinkle of genetics is probably some factor, is my guess.
Little sprinkle of DNA. Yeah.
And it's just and for people who are dealing with this, like the best thing, hands down, with any issue, sleep, eat, and stay hydrated. Right. Because personally, I am at my worst when I'm dehydrated or if I'm really tired. I do notice a huge sensitivity than normal. So definitely just try your best to just like take care of yourself. And and I'm so glad that you have this podcast and we have a bit of a community to at least share tips and support.
Absolutely. Well, Christina, great to have you on, and good luck with everything else. Stay in touch.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you, Christina. Fun chat. Make sure to please check out her Instagram at DEO_Christina, DEO_Christina. If you liked this episode, don't forget to leave a quick review or just hit the 5 stars wherever you listen to this podcast. Music, as always, is by Moby. And until next week, wishing you peace and quiet.